and welcome to your next episode of Cooking with Nichole. Tonight I'm going to do one of my personal favorites, and my husband's a huge fan of this particular dish as well. I'm going to add a little twist on it compared to what I normally do with this recipe. For the only fact of the matter that when I usually make chicken piccata, it's kind of a dump recipe. I don't really do a whole lot of measuring. I don't do a lot of specifics. But for you guys, I figure if you're a beginner cook or you're wanting a fancier dinner to serve to guests or something like that, that you might want to have the specifics, to have the specific amount of the olive oil, etc. And so of course the recipe will be posted at the end of the video as always. So I changed it up so it's a little simpler to do all of the measuring compared to what I normally do, but I promise you it's going to be equally as delicious. And so tonight I'm making chicken piccata with artichokes. Folks, this is incredible. It is so delicious. It is such a fun recipe to make. It kind of makes you feel like you're eating at a fancy restaurant. And so what I've got for us set up tonight is I have a pound of chicken tenders. You can use regular chicken breasts, and actually the recipe online will be posted that you use a pound of chicken breasts. It's going to talk you through taking that chicken breast and having it, cutting all the way through that chicken breast to make it thinner, and to then even thin it out further, you put those halved chicken breasts between a couple of sheets of saran wrap, and then you take a tenderizer or a meat hammer, the flat side, and you flatten them out so that they're even thinner. The purpose of that essentially is to just make the meat cook more thoroughly and quicker, to make the recipe faster, versus trying to cook these thick chicken breasts. It just makes it more delicate as well. And so I didn't have chicken breasts on hand, but I did have chicken tenders. And so I'm going to use chicken tenders. And because chicken tenders are already naturally thinner, we're not going to pound them out. So the recipe will walk you through that step by step. But what I also then have is a half a cup of almond flour with some seasoning in it. So I took the half a cup of almond flour and I mixed into it some pepper, some salt, and some garlic powder, just to give the coating a little bit of flavor. The recipe that inspired this actually uses white flour, but to keep this lower carb in nature, I swapped it out to almond flour and it'll turn out just fine. It's just enough to give it a little bit of coating. Then behind me here we have Big Bertha set up to do our cooking. I have 6 ounces of artichoke, and you can use canned artichoke or the glass jars of artichoke from Costco or Sam's Club. I have a teaspoon of minced garlic, which is the equivalent of 2 cloves of garlic cut up, some parsley, olive oil, some lemon juice, and you can use actual real lemon if that's what you have on hand. I've got half a cup of chicken broth, a cup of dry white wine, and then some capers and butter. So all of this is going to make up our chicken piccata. On the back side here, I have a pot of water that is slowly coming to a boil, because what I'm going to choose to serve our chicken piccata over is some low carb spaghetti pasta. This is from the Great Low Carb Bread Company. You can pick this up at Strong Pour or Wellness District in West Fargo, North Dakota, or order it online. So that is what we're going to be putting together. So we're going to start out here with dredging our tenderloins into our seasoned almond flour. And so I'm going to show you how to go about that. I'll complete the process and bring you back once we're getting ready to put it on the frying pan. So to dredge our chicken tenders, you just want to lay it simply down into the flour and just kind of pick up the flour and mash it on there. No sense to use an egg or anything like that, like an egg wash, because the flour is just going to stick by itself. And quite honestly, we don't want this to be heavily coated. We just want this just a nice light coating and not fully battered. And so you're gonna do this with every chicken tender or every flattened out chicken breast that you did in the beginning if you're following the recipe the way it is laid out at the end of this video. And so you can see that it's just a nice light coating. We'll bring you back when we're all done with the dredging process. All right, so we have our chicken tenders all floured up now with the almond flour with the light seasoning, and you can see how it is just a nice light coating. It's not going to be a thick coating. The nice thing about the almond flour is that it's going to give it a nice nutty component. It's going to be a nice flavor enhancement. So while we were bringing it back on board here, I started to heat up my frying pan. You want to heat it up so it gets nice and hot, but it's not scorching hot. And then you're going to add to it 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball this. It's usually like a 1-2 count when you're eyeballing it. And you're just going to let this spread all over, and you can kind of see how it's shrinking back a little bit. When your pan is nice and hot, the olive oil will actually ripple a little bit as well. You don't want it to smoke because then it's too hot, and so you just kind of evenly coat the bottom of your pan there. And then we're going to just start adding the chicken tenders to the bottom of the pan. Now you might have to do this in sections, or in other words, you might have to put a couple of the chicken tenders in, start it to let them cook, and then go ahead and add another few of the tenders in, because you don't want to overcrowd your pan, because the coating isn't going to crisp up the way that you want it to. It's not going to get hot enough to create that nice brown texture. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to start out here with these few chicken tenders, and it's starting to make nice crackly popping sounds. You're going to cook each of the chicken tenders for about 4 minutes on each side, or until each side looks opaque. Once they're cooked, you can take those out, add your next batch of chicken tenders into the pan. Once they're cooked, then you're going to take them out of the pan, and we're going to create our sauce. So once our chicken tenders are cooked, we'll bring you back. All right, so we've got the chicken tenders. We did them in 2 batches, all browned up, and you can see how they're a nice light golden color and how they're opaque all the way through, or otherwise they look white. They may not be completely done on the inside, but we're going to put them back into the frying pan at the end of the video. It's going to just finish the cooking process if there is any of that needed. So we cooked them, we took them out, and we set them aside. It's important then to turn down your heat once you take the chicken breast out, one, so that it doesn't splatter, but you don't want to overcook your flour and stuff that's in there. Also, while we were cooking the tenders, I have dropped the spaghetti into the boiling water, and we're just going to let that boil up while we're making this. So now we can, as you can see, we've got all of this nice brown toasted almond flour goodness. And so what we're going to do is we're going to drop a little bit of butter into the bottom of our pan, just another little layer of oil. And again, if it's cooking too fast, you want to turn down your heat. So we're going to add in a little bit of butter, about a tablespoon of butter. And to that then, we're going to add our teaspoon of minced garlic, which is the equivalent of 2 cloves of garlic chopped up, and our 6 ounces of artichokes. And so we're going to add these in. And we're just going to cook these guys down until, for about a minute, just until they're kind of soft. You don't want to overcook them. We're basically just adding our aromatics to the bottom of the pan, and just to warm them up a little bit and give them a little color. It's seasoning our brown bits, if you will. So you're like, Nichole, what are brown bits? Brown bits are all the yummy flavored goodness from the flour and the fats from the chicken that were cooked on the bottom of the pan. And so we're kind of just freeing those up a little bit, and that's what gives your dish all of its wonderful color and flavor. So we're just kind of warming these up. Like I said, you don't want to cook them for a real long time before you start adding in your other ingredients, about a minute. It's roughly been that. And so now we're going to add to that our 1/2 cup of chicken broth and our of dry white wine. Now I'm using a dry white cooking wine that you can find in the grocery store, usually in the same aisle where you find the olive oils or vinegars. Or if you have a dry white wine that's your favorite drinking wine, you can simply use that too. And then we're going to add in our wine. Very good. We're going to just turn up the heat again, back up to a medium-high heat. And as we're doing that, this is where you're going to scrape off all of that yummy, delicious brown bits off of the bottom. It's going to create a great, great flavor. Now, if you're worried about the alcohol in the dish, that's going to maybe cause problems when you're eating it. Can you get drunk off of eating a dish with some alcohol? No, because what happens is during the cooking process, you get all of the flavor, but all of the alcohol is cooked out. So you don't get the alcohol effect, but just the lovely flavor as we're cooking. And so turning the heat up to about medium to medium high, and we're just gonna let this simmer a little bit. Typically, what I would do when I make this recipe on my own is, this is where I would add a little bit of heavy cream and some grated Parmesan to this. Now again, I'm using a different recipe tonight just to keep the steps down a little bit, to keep the calorie load down a little bit so that it's not so calorie dense. So hence the reason why I'm not adding the cream or the Parmesan cheese. But if you were wanting to do that, that's where you could do that. You know, a couple of tablespoons of heavy cream and about a fourth to a half a cup of grated Parmesan would work perfectly at this point. So we're just letting this simmer, and as this starts to simmer, it's going to thicken up a little bit. And when that starts to thicken up, we're going to add a couple of squirts of our lemon juice and about another tablespoon of butter just to make it velvety. So once that process is done, we'll bring you right back. All right, so as you can see, it's come to a nice boil. So my husband is a big fan of Parmesan cheese, and I told you that I wasn't going to add any to the recipe, but behind the scenes I did. I sprinkled in about a fourth of a cup of grated Parmesan cheese just for him tonight, and because he's such a great cameraman. Now, because this is at a great boil, I'm going to add our second tablespoon of butter, and this is also going to make it that velvety consistency overall. It's going to just add that great buttery flavor. So nice and brown, a great, great broth. And this is where we're going to then add our squirt of lemon juice. Not a lot, but it just helps to offset the flavor. A couple of rounds of pan. And then you're going to add in about 2 tablespoons of capers. I love capers. As you noticed, I haven't added a whole lot of salt to this because there was salt in the flour that we used. The artichoke and the capers their brines have quite a bit of salt in them. So I haven't salted or used a lot of salt in the dish. If you're more of a saltier person and you like to use more salt, by all means, you can certainly do so. So dumped in a couple of tablespoons of the capers, and that's going to add a nice almost kind of like pickly or bitter flavor. So you're getting all of the flavors of some sour, some acidic with the lemon. Really, really delicious. And then our parsley for a little color and a little flavor, and a little bit goes a long ways. You just kind of want to mix this all together like so. And this is where we're going to add back in then our chicken tenders for their cook through. And you could definitely add all of them in at this point. In the beginning, you don't want to put them all in because, again, like I said, you don't want to overcrowd the pan to decrease the temperature of the pan while you're trying to toast them up and get them nice and brown. And we're just going to tuck it all in, and this is just going to boil itself down. Now, if you feel like your sauce has gotten a little thick, maybe you like to have a saucier piccata, what you can do then is just add a little extra chicken broth to thin that out. And we're just going to let this cook down, guys, and just until the chicken is thoroughly cooked through, about another 2 to 3 minutes, and we're set to go. Our spaghetti is coming to a boil, so we're gonna put that on the top. I promise to have a picture available for you when we're all said and done. I'll post the recipe as usual with the nutrition facts information. I know this got to be a more lengthy video, but I promise you it is totally worth it and you'll enjoy it. This is your sweet meal for deal for the night, and we'll see you guys soon.